Thank you for being here. I want to start with something uncomfortable. Most of you watching this believe you understand your financial situation. You look at your paycheck, you look at your bank account, you think you know where you stand, but I'm going to show you something that most people don't see because they're looking at the wrong numbers. And what I'm about to explain could save you from making a mistake that millions of Americans are about to make in the next 48 hours. You see, I've spent 50 years studying how economies work. Not as theories, as machines, simple parts creating complex results. And right now, the machine that processes your money, your savings, your purchasing power, that machine is breaking down. But here's what's strange. Most people can't see it. They're being told that relief is coming. Tax cuts, new deductions, the one big, beautiful bill. And they believe it. I understand why. When someone hands you what looks like more money, it feels like progress. But if you understand how the economic machine actually works, and I'll show you exactly how in just a moment, you'll see that what's happening is the opposite of progress. It's extraction. Slow, methodical extraction of your wealth while you're being told you're getting richer. One person's spending is another person's income. One person's debt is another person's asset. These are the simple rules that drive everything, and right now the government's debt, $38 trillion and growing by $23 billion every single day, is creating a situation where the very act of paying that debt is destroying the value of your savings. Now, I promised I'd show you something specific, and I will. But first, I need you to understand the mechanism because without that, the numbers won't make sense. Here's the question I want you to hold in your mind. What happens when your costs rise by 10% while your income rises by 3%? Most people don't do this math. They don't sit down with a calculator and work through what their life will actually cost next year versus what they'll actually earn. But the machine does this math automatically. Every month, every year, it's happening right now, whether you're paying attention or not. And on January 1st, something specific accelerates this process, a trigger that almost no one is talking about. I'll explain exactly what that trigger is before we're done today. But first, you need to understand why you can't trust what you're being told about your own money. The government calls it a tax cut. The machine calls it something else entirely. And by the end of this conversation, you'll know exactly what that is, and more importantly, what to do about it. Now, before I explain what's coming, I want to tell you about the worst mistake of my career, because it taught me everything I know about seeing what's really happening. In 1982, I was absolutely certain that the United States was heading into a depression. The Federal Reserve was tightening, debt levels were high, Mexico had just defaulted. I was so confident that I went on television. I appeared on Wall Street Week. I testified before Congress. I told everyone who would listen that a depression was coming. And I was dead wrong. The economy didn't collapse. It didn't even stumble. Instead, it began one of the greatest bull runs in American history. An 18-year expansion that created more wealth than any period before it. My experience was like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat. Being so wrong, so publicly wrong, was incredibly humbling. I went broke. I had to borrow $4,000 from my father to pay my family's bills. I had to lay off everyone at my company until Bridgewater was just one employee. Me, alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. Why am I telling you this? Because that failure taught me to ask a different question. Instead of asking, am I right? I learned to ask, how do I know I'm right? And when I studied what I missed, I discovered something crucial. I had looked at the debt cycle, but not the full debt cycle. I saw short-term pressures, but missed the long-term mechanics. There are 2 cycles running at all times. Most people, even most economists, only see one of them. Let me explain this because it's key to everything. The short-term debt cycle is what you hear about on the news. Interest rates go up and down, recessions happen, recoveries follow. This cycle runs 5 to 8 years. But underneath that is the long-term debt cycle. This runs 75 to 100 years, and it operates on different logic. In the short-term cycle, debt is managed by central banks moving rates. When things get bad, they lower rates. People borrow more, economy recovers. But in the long-term cycle, debt accumulates decade after decade. Eventually, you reach a point where lowering rates doesn't work because rates are already near zero. That's when the rules of the game change completely. When a nation reaches this point, and I've studied this across 500 years of history, the government faces an impossible choice. They can default on the debt, politically impossible, They can dramatically raise taxes or cut spending, also politically impossible. Or they can devalue the currency, print money, make everyone's money worth less. That's what's happening right now. That's what the machine is doing, not as a conspiracy, not as a choice made in some smoke-filled room, but as the inevitable mechanical result of the position we've put ourselves in. This has happened before. It happened in the 1930s, it happened in the 1970s, and it's happening again right now in our lifetime to our savings. In the 1970s, inflation ran so hot that if you saved $100, you lost nearly half its purchasing power in a decade. People who thought they were being responsible were actually being robbed slowly. The same pattern, the same mechanics, but today the debt is larger, $38 trillion. The debt is growing by $23 billion per day, every single day. That's $114,000 for every American citizen. That's $69,000 added every second. And the interest payments, this is the part almost no one talks about. The interest payments on that debt are now larger than the entire defense budget, larger than Medicare, second only to Social Security in total government spending. Starting in 2026, the government will pay more than $1 trillion per year just in interest, not paying down the debt, not investing in infrastructure or education or healthcare, just paying the interest on what we already owe. In the first 9 weeks of fiscal 2026 alone, we've already paid $104 billion in interest. That's $11 billion per week, 15% of all federal spending just to service the debt. And here's what that means for you. To pay that interest, the government has to either raise taxes dramatically, which is politically difficult and economically destructive, or keep printing money. Printing money doesn't make you richer. It makes the prices of things you need go up while the dollars in your account stay the same. That's the hidden tax. That's what no one is explaining to you on the evening news. And in just a moment, I'll show you exactly how this is showing up in your life right now in ways you might not have connected yet. Now let me show you something specific, because this is where it becomes real. This is where the abstract mechanics of debt cycles translate into your grocery bill, your insurance premium, your monthly budget. You might have heard about the new tax provisions. The standard deduction for families is going up to $32,200 in 2026. And if you're listening to the headlines, if you're reading the political talking points, you might think, good, more money in pocket. Finally, some relief. But let me show you the other side of the ledger, because that's where the truth lives. Medicare Part B premiums are jumping nearly 10%, from $185 to $202.90 per month. That's $215 more per year, automatically deducted from your Social Security check before you even see it. But wait, you might say, Social Security is getting a cost of living adjustment, right? Yes, 2.8%. That adds about $56 to the average monthly check. Now do the math. The Medicare premium increase alone consumes nearly a third of that raise. Before you buy groceries, before you pay utilities, before you fill your gas tank, before you do anything else. And that's just Medicare. That's just one line item. Private insurance premiums, for those still working or on employer plans, are projected to rise 9% in 2026. Some estimates put it even higher. The consulting firm Mercer surveyed over 1,700 employers. The firm Aon surveyed over 1,000 companies. They all found the same thing: healthcare costs are exploding. That's the largest increase in over a decade, the biggest jump since the years following the financial crisis. For people on the ACA marketplace, what most people call Obamacare, the situation is even worse. If the enhanced tax credits expire, and as of right now they're set to expire at the end of 2025, premiums could more than double. Not rise a little, double. Insurers are requesting an average 18% rate increase for 2026, the largest since 2018. The Kaiser Family Foundation estimates that subsidized enrollees could see their costs jump by 114%. Now pause for a moment. Think about what this means. The government is giving you $1 with the tax cut and taking back $2, maybe $3 through healthcare costs. That's not relief. That's a magic trick. It's misdirection. Look at this hand while the other hand empties your pocket. But healthcare is just one piece. Let me show you the full picture of what's happening to the American middle class. Groceries. Overall food prices are up 3.2% year over year. But that average hides the real story. That average smooths out the pain points where families actually feel the squeeze. Beef prices are up 14.7%. Ground beef hit a record high of $6.23 per pound in September 2025. Coffee is up 18.9%. Eggs remain volatile, still up over 60 cents from where they were, subject to swings from avian flu outbreaks that can send prices soaring overnight. The USDA projects prices continuing to rise through 2026. A family of 4 can expect to pay nearly $1,000 more for food next year than they did this year. That's not my estimate. That's the Department of Agriculture's projection. Housing. For homeowners, property taxes and insurance premiums have exploded. In states like Florida, Texas, and California, insurance costs have doubled in some markets, tripled in others. Even if your mortgage is paid off, even if you did everything right, save diligently, paid down your debt, you're paying more every month just to stay in your own home. Utilities. Electric rates are climbing even as other prices stabilize. Over 210 gas and electric utilities have raised rates or proposed increases to go into effect within the next 2 years. Your heating bill, your air conditioning, your ability to keep the lights on, all getting more expensive. Now add this up. Do the math that the politicians hope you won't do. You get a tax deduction worth maybe $500 to $600 per year for a typical family. But your healthcare costs rise $1,500 to $2,000. Your grocery costs rise another $1,000. Your utilities rise another $300 to $500. Your insurance rises another $500 to $1,000. The math doesn't lie. You're going backward, every month, every year, slowly but relentlessly. This is what I call the money illusion. You're holding more dollars. The number in your bank account might even be slightly higher, but those dollars buy less life, less health, less security, less future. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. Here's what I want you to really understand. Most people won't see this coming, not because they're stupid, they're not because they're not paying attention, they are, but because it happens drip by drip, gradually, almost imperceptibly. It's not a crash, it's an erosion. You don't wake up one morning and think I'm 10% poorer than I was last year. There's no headline announcing your personal financial decline. You just notice that things feel tighter, that the gas tank costs more to fill, that you're putting less into savings, that you're making choices you didn't used to have to make, choosing between medications and groceries, between the electric bill and the car payment. This is how wealth transfers happen in history, not through dramatic events, not through crashes that make the front page, but through slow, invisible mechanisms that move value from one group to another. And right now, value is moving away from the American middle class, especially those on fixed incomes, retirees, people who saved responsibly, and it's moving toward those who hold assets that rise with inflation. 46% of Americans now say that the cost of living is the worst they can ever remember. That's not a political talking point, that's a Politico poll. Nearly half the country feels squeezed in ways they've never experienced before. This is the paradigm shift I've been warning about. For 40 years, the winning strategy was simple and intuitive. Save money, avoid debt, be responsible, live within your means. Those were the rules that worked. But in a world where currency is being devalued to pay off government debt, where inflation is a policy choice rather than an accident, that strategy stops working. The rules have changed, and most people don't realize it yet. Cash is losing purchasing power every single day. Not because you're doing anything wrong, not because you're making mistakes, but because the machine requires it. Because the math of $38 trillion in debt requires the currency to be worth less over time. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, Ray, this is depressing. What's the point of telling me all this? The point is this. If you can see the mechanics, you can position yourself on the right side of the transfer. In every crisis, in every shift, there's always a right side. Some people come out ahead. Not because they're lucky, not because they have insider information, but because they understand the machine and position themselves accordingly. And in just a moment, I'll tell you exactly what the trigger event is, the specific date when this acceleration becomes undeniable, and what you can do to protect yourself before it happens. All right, I promised I would tell you the specific trigger. The moment when this slow erosion becomes an avalanche, when the gradual becomes sudden, January 1st, 2026. Here's what happens on that date. The United States crosses a threshold that has never been crossed before in peacetime history. Interest payments on the national debt exceed $1 trillion per year. Not total debt. Just the interest, just the cost of servicing what we already owe. The annual price tag for past decisions made by past generations that we're now paying for. To put that in perspective, we're already spending $104 billion on interest in just the first 9 weeks of fiscal 2026. That's $11 billion per week, 15% of all federal spending just to pay interest on borrowed money. And here's the problem. That interest has to be paid first. It's non-negotiable. Before Medicare, before Social Security, before defense spending, before education, before infrastructure. Before anything else that government does, the interest gets paid. So what happens when interest takes a bigger and bigger slice of the budget? One of 3 things, and only 3 things. This is the trilemma that policymakers face, and I want you to understand it clearly. Option 1, dramatically cut spending, slash Medicare, Social Security, defense. Tell millions of Americans that the benefits they've paid into for decades are being reduced. This is politically impossible. No elected official who votes for this will remain in office. Option 2, dramatically raise taxes, increase the burden on individuals and businesses to cover the shortfall. This kills economic growth, creates recession, and is also politically impossible. No politician wins elections by raising taxes. Option 3, print more money, monetize the debt. Keep the machine running by creating currency out of thin air. Which option do you think they'll choose? Which option have they always chosen throughout history when faced with this situation? This is the trap we're in. There are only 3 doors, and 2 of them are welded shut by political reality. The third door, printing money, looks painless in the short term. You don't see the cost immediately. There's no vote, no announcement, just a gradual erosion of purchasing power that takes years to fully feel. But it guarantees that the dollars in your bank account buy less every year. It guarantees that savers are punished and borrowers are rewarded. It guarantees that the middle class gets squeezed. Now let me explain why the Federal Reserve is caught in an impossible position. If they keep interest rates high to fight inflation, the government's borrowing costs explode. $38 trillion at high interest rates is unsustainable. The math simply doesn't work. If they lower interest rates to ease the debt burden, they risk reigniting inflation. More cheap money, more currency debasement, more erosion of purchasing power. There's no clean way out. There's no policy solution that makes everyone whole. There's only choices between bad options and worse options. I said this publicly at the Fortune Global Forum in October, and I'll say it again here. This is like an economic heart attack. Not a cold, not a flu, a heart attack. You know how a heart attack works? Plaque builds up in the arteries, slowly, over years, over decades. You feel fine, you go about your life. Maybe you notice you're a little more tired, a little more winded, but nothing dramatic. Nothing that demands attention. And then one day, the blockage reaches a critical point and everything changes in an instant. What was gradual becomes sudden. What was manageable becomes a crisis. We're spending 40% more than we're taking in. That's not sustainable. That's not responsible. And the debt service payments are like plaque in the arteries, squeezing away the government's ability to spend on anything productive, crowding out investment, crowding out opportunity. My guess, and I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you the exact date because no one can, is that within 3 years, give or take a year, we'll reach a critical point, a moment where the markets say we don't trust this debt anymore. When that happens, it won't be gradual. It will be fast. It will be disruptive. And the people who weren't prepared will be the ones who pay the price. Now, let me explain something important, because this will determine whether we come out of this transition relatively okay or whether it becomes truly destructive. When debt gets this high, there's always a deleveraging. The debt has to come down relative to income and GDP. That's not optional. That's not a policy choice. It's mechanics. It's math. It's the inevitable unwinding of imbalances that have built up over decades. But deleveragings can happen in 2 ways. A beautiful deleveraging is when policymakers balance 4 things carefully. Some debt reduction through restructuring, some austerity, meaning reduced spending, some transfer of wealth from those who have more to those who have less, and enough money printing to offset the deflationary forces that would otherwise cause depression. When these four elements are balanced, when they're calibrated correctly, the economy can actually grow while the debt burden falls. Incomes rise faster than prices. It's painful but manageable. It's difficult but survivable. And ugly deleveraging is when the balance is wrong. Too much money printing leads to runaway inflation. Too little leads to depression and deflation. The extremes produce social upheaval, political instability, sometimes, historically, war. Right now, I'm not confident we're heading toward a beautiful outcome, because a beautiful deleveraging requires coordination, patience, and long-term thinking. It requires politicians to make difficult choices that might cost them elections. It requires sacrifice to be distributed fairly. And in today's political environment, with polarization at historic levels, with short-term incentives dominating, with each party focused on protecting its own constituencies rather than solving problems, I don't see the leadership willing to make the hard choices that a beautiful deleveraging requires. So what does that mean for you? It means you cannot rely on the system to protect you. You have to protect yourself. You have to understand the mechanics and position yourself accordingly. Some people will say, but Ray, America is special. We're the reserve currency. We can handle more debt than other countries. The rules that apply to others don't apply to us. I hear this argument all the time, and there's some truth to it. Being the world's reserve currency gives us advantages that other nations don't have. We can borrow in our own currency. We can print money to pay our debts. Other countries have to earn dollars to pay theirs. That matters. But the reserve currency status doesn't give us unlimited runway. It doesn't exempt us from the laws of mathematics. It gives us more rope. And we're using that rope to hang ourselves. Look at what's happening with foreign buyers. China has slashed its treasury holdings to $730 billion. That's the lowest level since December 2008. They're buying gold instead, at record pace, diversifying away from dollar assets. One man's debts are another man's assets. And when creditors stop believing that our debts are good stores of value, when they start diversifying away, that's when the interest rates we pay start climbing regardless of what the Federal Reserve does. Japan held debt at 240% of GDP for years, but they had domestic buyers. Their citizens owned the debt. They had patriotic savers who would accept low returns because they were investing in their own country. Our debt is increasingly foreign held, and foreign holders can leave. They don't have patriotic obligations. They're making investment decisions based on return and risk. And if they decide the risk is too high, if they decide there are better places to put their money, they'll move. This isn't doomsaying. This is just mechanics, cause and effect. The same patterns I've studied across centuries of history, the same patterns that have played out in empire after empire, currency after currency. So what do? That's what we need to talk about now. Here's the thing that most people miss. In every crisis, every single one in history, there's a wealth transfer. Money doesn't disappear, it moves. Value doesn't vanish. It shifts from one group to another. In 2008, when the financial system nearly collapsed, those who held cash when everything was crashing were able to buy assets at fire sale prices. I was one of them. Berkshire, Bridgewater, the prepared investors who had liquidity when others were forced to sell. We didn't create the crisis, but we were positioned to benefit from it. In the 1970s, those who held gold and real assets while cash was being devalued came out ahead. They preserved their purchasing power while others watched their savings melt away. Pain plus reflection equals progress. That's a principle I've lived by my entire career. And the pain of this transition can become your progress if you position correctly. So let me give you the specific steps. Not theory, not philosophy. Practical actions you can take. Step 1. Don't trust the raise. Whatever extra dollars come from tax cuts, from cost of living adjustments, from any government program that promises to help you, do not spend them. They're not real gains. They're an illusion designed to make you feel better while the underlying mechanics work against you. Instead, immediately put those dollars toward protecting your purchasing power. Step 2. Own what reprices with inflation. Cash is trash in this environment, not because cash is inherently bad. Cash has its uses. But holding large amounts of cash when currency is being devalued is like standing still on a moving walkway going the wrong direction. You want assets that rise when prices rise. Gold, which has been a store of value for 5,000 years. Commodities that people need regardless of economic conditions, real estate in stable areas with growing populations, stocks in companies that produce essential goods, things people can't stop using even in a recession. I've been moving my own investments toward utilities, railroads, food producers, companies that solve human needs rather than human desires. Things that generate cash flow regardless of whether the economy is booming or struggling. Step 3. Build a liquidity buffer specifically for healthcare. This is critical. Healthcare costs are rising faster than any other category. And medical expenses are the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. Not bad investments, not business failures, medical bills. You need at least 1 year of healthcare costs, premiums, deductibles, medications, potential emergencies, set aside in accessible cash or short-term instruments. Not for wealth building. For survival, for making sure that a health crisis doesn't become a financial crisis. Step 4. Diversify across uncorrelated return streams. This is what I call the holy grail of investing. The discovery that changed everything for me after my 1982 failure. If you can find 15 to 20 good return streams that are uncorrelated, that don't all move together, you can dramatically reduce your risk without reducing your expected return. It's almost like magic, but it's actually just mathematics. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, not even a basket you think is safe. Diversify across asset classes, across geographies, across strategies. Make sure that no single event can devastate your entire financial position. Step 5. Simplify what you own. If you can't explain an investment in one sentence, you don't really own it. You're renting a feeling of security. You're paying for complexity that you don't understand. In a crisis, complexity kills. The people holding structured products, leveraged instruments, things with fancy names they can't quite explain, they're the ones who get destroyed. They're the ones who discover that they didn't actually understand what they owned until it was too late. Step 6. Document your decisions. Write down why you're making each move. What's your reasoning? What's your thesis? What would have to happen to change your mind? This removes emotion from the equation. When markets panic, and they will panic, you'll have your own logic to return to, your own principles to guide you. That's how you stay calm when everyone else is losing their minds. That's how you avoid selling at the bottom and buying at the top. I want to leave you with something important. We're witnessing a classic breakdown. The monetary system, the political system, the geopolitical order, they're all shifting at once. The old assumptions aren't holding, the old playbooks aren't working. This kind of breakdown happens only once in a lifetime. But it has happened many times in history when similarly unsustainable conditions were in place. I've studied these moments. I've documented them. And while each one is unique in its details, the patterns are remarkably consistent. We're heading into what I believe will be very, very dark times. I'm not optimistic about the trajectory. I wish I could tell you otherwise. I wish I could point to leadership or policy that makes me confident we'll navigate this well, but I can't. But I want you to remember something. Evolution is the only constant. The economy will adapt. Humanity will adapt. And individuals who understand the mechanics can not only survive, they can thrive. Pain plus reflection equals progress. The pain is coming. That's not something I can change or you can avoid. The reflection is your choice. And the progress, the positioning on the right side of the wealth transfer, that's what this entire conversation has been about. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me what percentage of your income goes to healthcare today compared to 5 years ago. I want to see the pattern. I want to understand how this is affecting real people in real communities. Because together, looking at the data collectively, we can understand what's really happening. And one more thing, if this was helpful, share it with someone you care about, especially someone over 60, especially someone on a fixed income. They need to see this before January 1st. The best time to prepare was last year. The second best time is today. Thank you.